Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Jayne Singer, and I am speaking to you today on Sunday morning, where it is for me. I know that it's Sunday evening for all of you. I'm talking to you from Boston in the United States and from the Brazelton Institute. And we're here today to think about how your newborn baby, whether they have arrived or whether you're waiting for them to be born, how your newborn baby can talk to you with their behavior. So I'm very excited for all of you. I think that if you are here today with me, that means you're either waiting for a new baby to be born or you have a new baby in your life. So congratulations. And we're going to have a little adventure together today as we think together about how very young babies come into the world with some skills that are already in place that can talk to us and communicate to us about the kinds of things that they are capable of and to communicate with you about what they need and want from you. So, we're here in service of this idea, right? That the first 1,000 days of life, that's about the first few years, are a time of massive brain development that has really lifelong implications for any child. And the first months of life, actually the first 100 days, offers a series of really important transitions for you as parents or becoming parents, for your baby, and then, of course, for your relationship together. I was very struck by the beauty of the logo that was on the slide that you were all watching while you were in the waiting room, that was talking to you as parents about raising your children to be the parents that you want them to be in the future. And that's what we're here in service of, right? Is really making the most of the first 100 days, the first 1,000 days in terms of your baby's development. What we know is that babies are born ready for relationships. They have skills from the moment they are born that show us that they want relationships and they want to be in relationship with you. So here you see this brand new newborn turning her head to her mother's voice. Some of you probably have already experienced this, some of you not yet, but it is a magical moment when the voice that your baby has been hearing for the last 3 months of pregnancy um, is even clearer to your baby after your baby is born. And they come out into the world and they are ready to turn towards those familiar voices and show that they are ready to be in a relationship with you. Not only that, but they also come with skills showing us that they're ready for survival. So if we put a brand new baby down on their tummy, which we would only do when they are awake, right? And when we are right near them, because we know that for when they sleep, we put them on their back. And the reason for that is that when we put them on their belly like this, they will show us that they have some inborn skills, showing us that they are built for survival. And if you notice this little one, as soon as he was put down on his belly, he turned his head to one side, right? So they're built in with this skill to clear their airway and make sure that they can breathe. However, when they're sleeping, especially a deep sleep, we don't know if they would turn their head, right? And that's why we always say sleeping on their back is what's best, right? Now, not only ready to interact with people, but they're interested in things. So they come into the world being able to see within about 12 to 15 to 18 inches in front of them. You have to play with your baby to figure out what distance is the best for him or her. But here you see the same baby looking at a bright red ball, bright red object, and then also the same baby looking at Dr. Brazelton. And look at the difference in the baby's behavior. When the baby is looking at the ball, her whole motor system is on alert. Her fingers, her toes, even her face with her little nose is pointed up towards the ball. Her motor system, her muscles get activated by looking at objects. But look at the same baby looking at Dr. Brazelton's face, right? Her whole motor system softens. Even look at the difference in her feet, right? Her muscle tone relaxes, her arms fall to the side, her face softens, and she is ready for a different kind of interaction when what she is seeing and who she is saying is a person. And your baby, is going to be most interested out of anything in the world in your face and in your voice, because that is exactly what her or his brain needs in order to grow and develop and thrive. They also come with some other skills, right? Sometimes crying can feel really uncomfortable for parents or maybe for other people in the baby's life, or maybe even um, strangers who are near the family when the baby cries. And yet, crying is a very, very important skill in communication, right? Because without crying, people around the baby who love and are taking care of the baby would not know that the baby has a need. So babies need to cry in order to signal to us, right, that they have something that they need from us. They cannot feed themselves, right? They cannot change their own diapers. They have a lot of needs from the people around them who love them, and crying is a perfect way of letting people know that they have a need. So, part of taking care and falling in love with your new baby means getting comfortable to a certain amount of crying in your life without blaming yourself or the baby, feeling as if, oh my goodness, there must be something that I'm doing wrong. No, the baby does need to cry. And that is one of the ways that your baby is talking to you, to let you know, I need something from you, mother or father or other caregiver. I need you to meet my needs. Now, the baby also comes into the world with other skills. So you see this baby, right, who was put on her belly again while she was awake, turned her head, and that then allowed her to get her hand to her mouth. Different families, different parents, different cultures all have some very different ideas about babies bringing their fingers to their mouth. All I can say is from a natural standpoint, babies all over the world have this skill. And I call it a skill because the baby has a natural sucking reflex that, of course, is necessary for their survival for when they feed, whether that's a bottle or breast. And that same natural sucking reflex prompts them to bring their hands to their mouth and suck on their fingers. And that helps them to feel calm and comfortable. It is a skill that they use to soothe their own self. So let's take a look at how some of these skills come together to build your baby's brain, and then we'll come back together again to keep thinking about what are all the different ways in which your baby communicates to you. All right, so let's take a look. This is the work that comes out of the Center for the Developing Child here at Harvard University. And let's listen.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
Hmm. All right. So we've had a chance to think about this idea of serve and return. It is a game. We just heard it referred to as a developmental game. The baby shows us a cue, we respond to the baby, and then the baby responds back. And that literally helps to build their brain. But what we need to be thinking about, especially with very young babies, is when is your baby most available to you for serve and return? Here we see the top picture, right? This is a baby right after birth who literally has just been born, bathed, wrapped up, and handed to his mother, right? And they are already engaged in serve and return just by looking into each other's eyes. That baby's brain is responding by building the connections in their neuronal pathways. Now, the baby down below here, right, is a baby who is crying, who has a different need right now than interacting face to face. And so, what we're here today to do is really think about what are the different states that your baby can be in. We can call them behavioral states, we can call them states of consciousness, but there are 6 different states that your baby rotates through many, many times during the course of any one given day. Here you see the baby on the top who's in a quiet, alert state. And here you see the baby on the bottom who's in a crying state, right? The baby on the bottom is getting very important communication back from their parent, right? But it's a very different kind of response and caregiving than what the baby needs when they're in this state. And I hope that all of you, as parents who are watching this and listening to this, are thinking about your own babies and thinking about what you have noticed already in your own baby, the different states that you've noticed them be in. So, like I said, there are 6 different states at any given time of day or night, because babies come into the world not knowing the difference between day and night, right? And slowly over time, Hopefully, they learn the difference and they learned to do more of their sleeping at night than during the day. But that takes some time, right? It takes quite a few weeks for a baby to settle into a pattern in which they start to understand the difference between night and day. The sleep pattern that we notice with babies is that sometimes they're in a very deep sleep. If you have not had your baby yet, so know this. Sometimes your baby is going to be in a very, very deep sleep where it looks like they are hardly moving. And others of you on this webinar, maybe you've already had your baby, and you might remember times going over to the baby to make sure that they're breathing because they're in such a deep sleep and they're not moving at all that it can sometimes be a little jarring for new parents because it can feel like, how come I don't see them moving? Until you go over and you see that very lightly you can see their chest moving up and down, or very lightly you can feel their breath coming out of their nose, right? But deep sleep, the baby is not moving. They're in a very, very, very deep state of sleep consciousness. Um, and or unconsciousness, right? But other times they're in light sleep. And in light sleep, you might see the baby's eyes fluttering. You might see the baby make faces. You might see some startles and some tremors. This is one of the reasons why newborn babies so often sleep much better if they are closely swaddled in, because in their light sleep, they might tremor or startle, and that might wake them up even more, right? And so it's very helpful for them to be swaddled in nice and close with their hands into midline, which we're going to talk about in a little while, right? So that it helps them when they're cycling in their sleep, because all of us do this. None of us sleep deeply all night. None of us. Not infants, not children, not adolescents, not grown-ups. We all cycle from awake to drowsy to light sleep to deep sleep, and then at least once during the night, cycle up from deep sleep into light sleep to drowsy, and then go back to sleep, right? And newborn babies, of course, need to cycle up into light sleep and drowsy and be fed, right? Because in the very beginning, newborn babies have to be fed at least every 2 to 3 hours, sometimes more frequently, because they're taking in their calories, they're taking in their nutrition, whether this is by bottle or by breast, they're taking in their nutrition 24/7, 24 hours a day, right? They are not ready yet to go 12 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours at night without being fed. However, this gives you a wonderful opportunity to start to know your baby's patterns and sleep patterns, right? And to recognize the differences in their behavior from when they're in a deep sleep, a light sleep, drowsy, right? Drowsy is when they're either getting ready to go to sleep or they're coming up out of light sleep. Light sleep, the baby could go back to sleep or they could be on their way to waking up. And you will be in the best position of being able to observe and watch your baby and figure out, well, which one is it? Are they coming up into awake and are getting ready to feed? Or are they just drowsy and yawning and going back to sleep? Right? Now, serve and return is best engaged with when the baby is in a quiet, alert state. So I'm inviting everybody to just take a look at this newborn baby in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. This is a baby who's less than 24 hours old. And every baby, when they come into the world in that first 24 to 48 hours, has a couple of different periods where they come up into a very clear alert state. And this picture managed to capture those moments for this baby, right? Bright-eyed, open-eyed, focused attention, looking right into the eyes of the person who has welcomed this baby into the world, right? These are the moments of meeting that are so important in your relationship with your child and so important to your child. This builds the serve and return, whether it's through talking to the baby, singing to the baby, touching your baby, right? You see the parent's hand right behind the baby's head. And if you notice, the baby has some skills to be able to stay engaged. They're looking directly at their caregiver, and at the same time, they've gotten their hands to their mouth. So there's that skill again, right? It's very exciting. It's very stimulating for the baby to meet their caregivers, their loved ones for the first time. And the baby has some skills to be able to stay engaged, which is by activating their suck reflex a little bit. Now, very young babies can't stay in a quiet alert state for very, very long. They will, over time, have more and more and more of their time during the day in a quiet alert state. But babies, all through their first year and beyond, certainly will also have times when they're in a fussy state, right? So we as doctors and neurodevelopmentalists call this active alert, but really what we can just call it is fussy, which means that the baby is awake, the baby is even alert, but the baby's uncomfortable. Okay, the baby's not fully crying yet, but the baby is in a fussy state, which gives us some cues that the baby is now has a need or has become a little overstimulated. They might be on their way to crying with a full blown need, or in this fussy state, we might be able to talk to them, hold them, communicate with them, and help them come back down to a quiet alert state, or maybe they're on their way to sleeping. All right. So, in their deep sleep, your baby is actually able to protect herself from sound and light. And maybe you've already noticed this if you have a newborn living at home. When your baby is in a deep sleep, a very loud sound could happen, and you might see your baby react very slightly. And if the sound happens again or and again, you'll see that the baby actually, if they're in a deep sleep, will protect themselves and stay sleeping, right? Maybe in the beginning they had a reaction, but if they hear the sound again, you see less of a reaction, less of a reaction. It's something we call habituation, right? They are very good and very skilled at protecting their sleep because their brains need a lot of sleep. When they're in a light sleep, right, they actually, in response to things that they hear or lights in the room, they might cycle up into becoming more wakeful, or they might return to sleep, right? Drowsy, they're on the in or their way in or out of sleep. And then here's the golden prize, right? Is quiet alert. That's the best time to talk and sing to your baby face to face and build their brain. And it is in that state when they're quietly alert that we also want to watch for cues of them getting overstimulated, right? Because, like I said before, it's very exciting for the baby. It's very stimulating for the baby to interact with you face to face. And yet they can't do it for very long periods. So watch your baby for cues of becoming overstimulated. And I'm not talking about getting their hands to their mouth. Their hands to their mouth does not mean that they're overstimulated. It means that they have a natural skill to soothe themselves so that they can stay engaged. However, if the baby spits up, starts hiccuping, many yawns, maybe even some tremors, if the baby looks away, let the baby look away and just wait for your baby to come back to you, right? Because the baby needs to take in the face to face interaction on their own time, right? If your baby looks away, does not mean that your baby does not want to look at your face. It just means they need a little break before they can come back. Sometimes we even see some signs of stress in the baby if there's too overstimulated. Maybe the sounds are too light, too loud. Maybe the light is too bright. Um, Maybe we've been interacting with them for a little bit too long. And we could even see things like changes in their skin color. Sometimes we see a little bit of paling around their lips, right? Where the rest of their face might have some really nice pink undertone. And then you start to see, oh, they're getting a little pale, a little bluing even, right? It shows us, okay, I've had enough, okay? And it's time to do something different with the baby rather than face to face. When the baby fusses, for sure, that is telling us, right, that the baby has had enough and needs something different. When the baby comes into a full fuss, they're uncomfortable. They have a need. Are they ready to be fed? Do they need a diaper change? Are they on their way to sleeping and they need to be swaddled and rocked and sing to them? Sometimes the baby is fussy just because they want some social interaction with you and they want you to talk to them. You'll be amazed at how many times the baby is fussy. And if you just start talking to them, how much they calm down and they want to do that. Now, of course, like I said before, sometimes we come into full blown crying, right? And it is amazing to see how many skills your baby has. That, of course, often when a newborn baby cries, it means that they're ready to be fed. But you're also going to notice that there's other times that the baby's crying and you're feeling like, well, but I just fed the baby. And I know that um, I know that their belly is full. So there are steps that we can take to engage with the baby very slowly and surely to see how much comfort do they need and how much interaction do they need from the people around us. Right? So if your baby's crying, try to show your baby your face, then your face and your voice. Then if you could please give me back the ability to screen share so that I can be back on. Thank you. If you could please give me back the ability to screen share. Thank you. All right. Sorry about that. Um, that is the nature of internet these days. I was dropped out of the Zoom platform. All right. So we just got finished talking about soothing and consoling. And all of this is again in service of our ability to have those moments of meeting with our babies. Right here, you see a baby in a quiet alert. Look how relaxed her tone is at her shoulders. Her arm just comes down and she turns towards her father's voice. Now, what we were just talking about was that when the baby is crying, they're letting us know about the level of stimulation that is creating a need for them to communicate with us about, right? So they might be hungry, they might be cold, they might be wet, but over time, you will, from getting to know your baby from so many different moments of meeting during the course of every day, you'll be able to figure out what is overstimulating to your baby. What activities that you engage your baby in tend to go from a quiet alert into a fussy, into a cry. And by observing those differences and those changes in your baby's state, you'll have the opportunity to figure out what your baby needs in their caregiving. So, what we were talking about when I was so rudely interrupted by being dropped from the Zoom is that when the baby cries, we have a chance to see what your baby is able to do for himself. So I know I've been talking quite a bit about this idea of the baby getting his hands to his mouth. And again, I want to be very respectful. Different families, different parents, different cultures have different ideas about babies getting their hands to their mouth. And so this is obviously up to you as a parent, what your comfort level is in allowing your baby to have his hands and fingers get to his mouth, right? But when the baby does get their hands to their mouth, they get a little bit more control over their fussy or crying state. So here you see a baby who was crying, right? You can see some of the color changes in his face, on his cheeks, and even on his torso down here, right? And we have the opportunity when the baby is fussing to look into his face, to look into his face and use your voice. Like I was saying before, even putting your hand on his belly, right? You see in the third picture down, or even bringing his hands together with your hand at midline with the tiniest little bit of pressure on his um, on his chest and belly. And then if that's not working, still pick him up, swaddle him up, rock him, and then finally something to suck on or to feed. And when you go through some of these steps, you get a chance to learn who your real baby is, right? Your baby, if you are waiting for your baby to be born right now, you have all sorts of imagined versions of your baby in your mind of who your baby is going to be. If your baby has already been born, you've started to know the real baby. And going through some steps like this gets you the opportunity to figure out who is my real baby, because different babies have different temperaments and different styles and different ways of interacting with the world. And when we slow down and observe their skills like this, you get a chance to really figure out how much your baby needs from you to communicate and to slowly help them get back into a more comfortable, or what we would say regulated state, right? Which leaves them even more available for what we were talking about before, the serve and return. So I'm actually going to skip this for right now to see what we're talking about when we say regulation, mutual regulation, meaning when the baby has been upset, if the baby has been in a full blown fussing or crying, right? Bringing that baby in for skin to skin, tucked up under your chin, is comforting not just for the baby, but for you, right? And there are brain changes going on inside of us when we become parents as well. And so We've been talking about serve and return as being so crucial for your baby's development, and of course it is, the back and forth face-to-face interaction, but just look at how important this moment of connection and this moment of mutual regulation is also for this baby. To feel connected, to feel comforted, to feel comfortable in this world with another person, right? The skin to skin, the baby's cheek to Dr. Brazelton's neck, the baby's head to the warmth of Dr. Brazelton's hand, right? All of those are also important for that baby's sense of security and comfort and safety, and to help them feel safe in this world and regulated within themselves, comfortable within themselves. So, getting to know your real baby gives you the opportunity to observe her over time. We talked about the 6 different states. What's the range of her states? In the beginning, is she spending most of her time in deep sleep and light sleep? Over time, is she spending more time in quiet alert as you get to meet her more and more and more? How does she shift from state to state? Is that smooth and predictable? Or do you have a baby where they shift from state to state in more of an abrupt way? And I can honestly tell you, as a parent of 4, that I have lived with and loved infants who have been extremely different from each other in this regard. Some babies go through their states in this very lovely, rhythmic, predictable pattern. Some babies shift their states very quickly. And it doesn't mean that you, as a parent, are doing anything wrong. It might mean that you have a particularly sensitive baby or a baby that needs more comforting from you to be able to cycle through their different states. How easily does your baby cry? Right? What does your baby need? Does your baby need the lights to be turned down? Does your baby need more holding, more swaddling, more rocking than another baby? Only you will know by observing your baby over time and trying different things out when your baby is in different states. And that will help you to figure out what she needs. So, when we're figuring out what the baby needs, right? One of the ways that we can figure out, like, oh, does my baby want some more time with me, talking face to face, rocking, etc. Or is my baby hungry? And one of the ways that newborn babies let us know that they are really ready for a feed is by this behavior of rooting. If we just touch ever so slightly next to the corner of their mouth, right? The baby, when they are rooting, turns very quickly towards the direction of where that finger is, right? It's a strong signal that they are ready to suck and to feed, all right? And you will also know about that because you will know how long it's been since her last feeding, right? But if you're trying to figure out what is it that my baby wants, you can go through some of those steps of consolability, showing the face, talking to your baby, putting your hand on their chest, bringing their hands together, picking them up. If they're rooting and crying, they're really letting you know, I'm ready for a feed right now. In terms of sleep, we talked a little bit about the difference between deep sleep and light sleep and then drowsy, right? And your baby will show you how much she is protecting her sleep. Especially if you're holding the baby, you'll get a chance to see and feel their reactions, right? You'll know that your baby is in a deep sleep and protecting their sleep because while if you're holding your baby and a loud sound happens or the lights come on, you might sense the baby shift in their sleep, maybe a little wiggle, maybe a little face grimace, maybe a little tremor, but then they go back to sleep, right? And they're showing that they are ready to protect their sleep, right? Newborn babies, some newborn babies protect their sleep so much that in the beginning, Your baby's doctor might tell you, you know what, if your baby hasn't woken up after a certain amount of hours, please wake your baby up and feed them. All right. But you'll talk about that with your baby's pediatrician. And again, you'll know best based upon your baby's states and how they shift in and out of their states. All right, ever so quickly, what we've been talking about is that your baby comes into the world with skills and with the ability to tackle some tasks, right? So all the things that we've been talking about today have to do with how they are managing their autonomic nervous system. When we talked about color of their skin, tremors, startles, their breathing, we talked about what they show us in their motor skills, their motor tone, their rooting and their sucking, right? Even their ability to hold on to your finger when you put your finger into their little palm, right? And they close their little fingers around you, right? They're showing us a skill. And we've been talking a lot about how they organize their state, how they protect their sleep, right? And then they're crying. How much do they need from you to help them get comfortable again once they are crying and have a need? And then last but not least, their quiet alert state that makes them available for serve and return with our face, with our voice, and even with toys and objects that we interact with them. So I'm just going to go through these quickly to show you that your baby, right from the start, wants to meet you. So let's take a look here at Dr. Kevin Nugent with a newborn baby.
To assess the baby's response to a voice, place your face out of the baby's line of vision and speak softly, first on one side and then on the other.
Yeah.
This can be a great time to
Yeah.
invite parents to participate.
Yeah.
Hey. So you've gotten a chance to see how your baby comes into the world ready to meet you, ready to be with you, ready to respond to your voice and to your face, which is very exciting for those of you who can't wait to meet your baby. If you're waiting for your baby to be born, well, your baby can't wait to meet you as well. All right, so before we stop for some questions, I'm going to put this all together for you so we have a chance to take a look at a newborn baby with her mom. And we're going to take a look at all of the things that we've talked about today. How it is that the baby is in different states at any given time, whether that's deep sleep or light sleep, drowsy or quiet alert, or fussy or crying, and how the baby's behavior shows us what they are ready for in terms of serve and return in their quiet alert, what overstimulates the baby, and what the baby and, of course, the parent can do to help the baby get back into a more comfortable state if they get overstimulated. All right, so let's take a look.
5 days old. Even in a newborn, there are clear periods of intense concentration and social interaction. While brief, they occur many times throughout the day. Often the best time for interaction is around a feed. Here, Maya is not yet ready. She appears milk drunk, sleepy and quiet. As she becomes more alert, she wants to interact, but her body needs to be still. She's too young to do it alone, so becomes distressed. Maya's mum comforts her with skin-to-skin contact. Maya's relaxed stillness communicates she's now content. With the support of loose wrapping and a hand under her head, Maya yawns. Yawns are often a sign of tiredness, but this time the yawn is a means of refocusing her attention. This lovely moment of mutual gaze is crucial for Maya's healthy brain development. Maintaining this focus is hard work. Maya gives herself little breaks by blinking and looking away. And even at 5 days of age, you may be rewarded with a smile.
Look at that.
After a few minutes of effort, a baby becomes tired. Increasing body movements and turning away communicate it's time to sleep. Now firmly wrapped, head cradled, Maya can comfortably drift off. This wonderful sequence of communication has happened all with the help of mum's concentrated attention.
It is very easy for people to miss it because you have to really look. I think you have to really be quiet and really be patient and try and look for it and be open for communication from them.
At 1 month, Edward is now happy at a slightly greater distance and with less support. He can hold his gaze for much longer. Edward still needs mum to help control his body movement so he can maintain eye contact. From quiet alertness, he moves quickly to distress, indicating exhaustion. However, he's already learnt being firmly wrapped means it's time to be helped to sleep. His response is instant.
All right. So we've come to the end of the content information that I wanted to share with you today, and I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity for a few minutes now here to put it all together to see if there are any questions that are coming in from any of you via the chat. And I would be very, very happy to uh, field any questions from you that you have, whether you are waiting for your baby to be born or if your baby has already been born. And I don't know, for some of you, maybe your baby is not a brand new newborn, but has already been with you for a little while. And while I'm waiting for questions to come in from the chat, I will talk a little bit about some of the kinds of questions that I typically would be getting from parents about now. And when I say about now, I'm talking about now in the presentation, but also about now in the development of their child and the development of their relationship with their child. I get a lot of questions from parents about sleep. So let's think about sleep. We can start to think about infant sleep even before the baby arrives, right? So when we're thinking about infant sleep, newborn sleep, we're of course also thinking about how are you planning and preparing for feeding your baby? Are you planning on breastfeeding your baby? Are you planning on bottle feeding your baby? Are you planning on a combination of breast and bottle? And thinking about those things ahead of time really gives you an opportunity to also start thinking about sleep, right? Because we were talking before about how the baby comes into the world not knowing the difference between night and day. which of course makes sense because they've been in a darkened, protected environment for a long time. And now suddenly there is much more bright light and interaction and different sensory sensations, right? And we know that babies can cope sometimes with the overstimulation of all of those sensations by going to sleep. And they need enormous amount of sleep in that first few weeks of life. But there are things that you and that we as parents can do right from the start to help babies to understand the difference between night and day. So from the moment you bring your baby home from the hospital or birthing center, um, there are ways in which for you and your baby, you can start to create some sense of routine, right? So the lights staying on during the course of the day, even while the baby is sleeping, right? And then at night, there being a little bit of a routine. They're not too young to start with a routine, even when they're teeny, teeny, tiny. So, for example, maybe bath time is going to be something that you do in the evening, and there is a nice relaxing bath for baby, and then a feed when the baby is hungry, and getting into the habit of engaging in some of the same routines that will carry over for a long, long time. So a bath, a feed, the baby is then, wrapped and swaddled and comfortable from a full feed, and maybe you want to engage in some of the same songs, some of the same rocking before you put the baby down for bed, at nighttime. You're going to have the lights off in a different way than you did during the day. The baby comes to understand that those cues you saw just now in the videotape from Australia, that little baby Edward, right? It only took a few months for him to understand when he was tired that uh, he was going to be helped to go to sleep by being wrapped. And as soon as he was being put into his swaddle, he calmed down because he knew that sleep was coming, right? So you can build in some of those routines in the evening right from the start. The bath, the swaddling, the feeding, the songs, the rocking, the lights are down, right? And your baby in the beginning is going to cycle from their drowsy, fussy, drowsy to light sleep to deep sleep. They're going to cycle back up again into light sleep and then into drowsy and fussy to signal that they need a feed, right? But those feeds during the night are times when the lights can stay dim or even off, right? Times that what you're signaling to the baby is that we're going to feed and go back to sleep, right? That's very different than during the day, even for a newborn, when the baby cycles up into light sleep and then fussy and then wakes up for a feed. And just as we just saw with little Maya um, uh, on the videotape, that during the day, after a feed, is a good time to be able to come into that quiet, alert state for the baby and share those face to face interactions for as much as the baby can stay awake for. And in the beginning, that will be short periods of time, but very, very soon, you will be rewarded with longer and longer periods of time that the baby stays awake. And even in that first few weeks, to get some of those first smiles that reward you as a parent for all of the careful tuning in that you've been done in trying to understand them. Over time, the more that you make the difference between night and day, that your behavior is different at night, that nighttime is not a time for play, nighttime is a time for the lights off, nighttime is a time for feeding and going back to sleep, then the easier it is for your baby to start to establish that they know the difference between night and day. And eventually, over time, your baby will not need the calories during the night. But again, that's something to talk with your baby's pediatrician about. Eventually, over time, your baby will still cycle up from deep sleep into light sleep into drowsy during the night. But when they no longer need the nutrition at night, right, you can just pat them and help them to go back into sleep. And eventually, when we say babies are sleeping through the night, that just means that they have mastered their patterns and shifts between states, meaning they'll cycle out of deep sleep into light sleep into drowsy, and then if they can find their hands, right? Some babies don't need to suck, but they can regulate themselves back down into light sleep and down into deep sleep. And babies will do that at least once during the night, usually twice, every 3 to 4 hours or 2 to 3 hours, cycle up into awake and then cycle back down. The other area that I get a lot of questions about has to do with feeding, and does my baby need a feed every time they cry, right? Now, there are some babies whose stomachs are very, very tiny and they need to eat quite frequently. And you're going to figure that out because a baby who is hungry is going to keep letting you know. And if they're crying and you've tried many other strategies and they're still crying, right? Then that could be a way that they're letting you know, no, I really do need another feed. And babies who are breastfeeding exclusively will want the calories more quickly. In other words, their feedings will be more frequent because they're digesting the breast milk more quickly than formula from a bottle. But in review, what we talked about today was that your baby will be giving you cues the whole time that you will get to understand. And believe me, by a few weeks old, you're going to be amazed that you're going to be able to tell the difference between your baby's cries, right? What feels so confusing in those first few hours, those first few days after birth, after about a month, you'll be able to tell, oh, that means he's awake and wants to get up. Oh, that means that she's hungry. Oh, I think that means that she's wet and she needs a new diaper. Or it might mean, I just want to be social with you. And that fussiness might be a way of saying, hey, I want you to come and engage with me in that face to face interaction that babies are born into the world ready to ask for, in addition to their basic needs for food and for sleep and for physical comfort. That the thing that they need most in this world, besides their basic nutrition and their basic needs for food, are not toys, are not videos, are not technology, but are you and your face and your voice. Because babies come into the world needing and wanting those interactions. And by nature, it is those interactions that will build your baby's brain. So I see that we have only about a minute or so left in our time together. And I'm not seeing any questions come in through the chat. I hope that you all were able to get some ideas today about what some of the behaviors are that you can look for in your baby, in your new baby, whether it is their eye contact or their ability to hold on to your finger or their rooting reflex, to start to think about your baby as a very competent and skilled little person that already has ways to communicate to you about who they are as a real person, as you are in this transition, moving away from the imagined baby that you had while you were waiting for your baby to be born to the real baby and their real and unique style of being in this world. You, as their parent, are in a far better position than any professional in your life to be able to know what your baby is saying to you because you will be there observing and you will see their patterns over and over and over again that will let you know who they are and what they need from you. So, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a privilege to be with you and to share these ideas with you. Thank you.